Imagine a house that feels less like bricks and stone and more like a memory etched into history. Byfleet Manor, a 17th century estate in the heart of Surrey, with ivy climbing its ancient walls and gardens stretching across 18 acres, was where Dame Maggie Smith chose to retreat from the world. A place once tied to royalty, a manor that has stood since long before the Domesday Book of 1086, now whispered with her presence. Inside its oak-beamed rooms and sunlit windows, life slowed to a timeless rhythm. Elegance without extravagance, privacy without loneliness. But why this house? Why would one of the greatest actresses of our time, a woman crowned with Oscars, BAFTAs, and Emmys, choose such quietude after a life in the brightest spotlight? Tonight, we step beyond those gates. We'll walk through her English home, revisit the dazzling stages and silver screens that built her fortune of $20 million, and reflect on the legacy she left behind. Because behind every wall, every award, and every role, there is a story of a woman who lived with grace and who left the world longing for one more curtain call. Margaret Natalie Smith was born in 1934 in Ilford, Essex. A child of modest means, with a mother who worked as a secretary and a father immersed in medical research. When the family moved to Oxford, no one could have imagined that the quiet girl with sharp eyes would one day be hailed as one of Britain's greatest treasures. At just 17, Maggie stepped onto the stage of the Oxford Playhouse as Viola in Twelfth Night. It was not just a performance, it was a declaration. A teenager daring to embody Shakespeare, her voice trembling yet magnetic, already hinting at the force she would become. 2 years later, she made her first television appearance, and by 1956, she had crossed the Atlantic to Broadway in New Faces of 56. Who could have guessed that the young actress walking nervously into the Ethel Barrymore Theatre would, decades later, be Dame Maggie Smith? The 1960s were her proving ground. At the Royal National Theatre, she embraced Shakespeare's heroines, most memorably Desdemona in Othello. When the play leapt from stage to film in 1965, Maggie's performance earned her an Academy Award nomination. The industry had taken notice. Here was a woman who could hold tragedy in her eyes and wit on her tongue, often in the very same scene. Then came the defining role, the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, 1969. As the unorthodox Scottish schoolteacher, Maggie lit up the screen with both charm and danger, a performance so layered it secured her first Oscar. It wasn't just a win, it was a coronation. The world knew. A star of rare brilliance had arrived. Through the 1970s, she proved it was no fluke. In California Suite, 1978, opposite Michael Caine, Maggie spun heartbreak into comedy and claimed her second Academy Award. She became a performer who thrived on contradictions, sharp yet vulnerable, humorous yet tragic. The 1980s and 90s brought a new wave of iconic roles. Audiences laughed with her in Murder by Death and thrilled to her presence in Death on the Nile. She earned accolades in A Room with a View, 1985, enchanting both critics and box offices alike. Then came a shift. Steven Spielberg cast her in Hook, 1991, and suddenly Maggie Smith was part of global pop culture. As the stern but kind Mother Superior in Sister Act and its sequel, she charmed a whole new audience. And in The Secret Garden, 1993, she reminded us of her unmatched ability to embody wisdom and warmth. By the late 1990s, her reputation was untouchable. Tea with Mussolini earned her yet another BAFTA, while The First Wives Club made her a Hollywood box office queen. Yet even with this acclaim, Maggie was never about chasing fame. She returned time and again to the stage, gathering Tonys and Evening Standard Awards, as though theater was the soil that kept her roots alive. Then, in 2001, came the role that would define her for an entirely new generation, Professor Minerva McGonagall in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Over the course of a decade, across 8 films, Maggie became the stern yet beloved matriarch of Hogwarts. For millions of children, her face was the face of magic itself. And as if that were not enough, she reinvented herself once more in the 2010s. As Violet Crawley, the Dowager Countess of Grantham in Downton Abbey, Maggie delivered barbed one-liners with the precision of a rapier. She won Emmys, she stole scenes, and she became a symbol of Britain's golden age of television. Could there be a greater testament to longevity, to still be at the peak of your craft in your 80s? Her career was not a straight path. It was a tapestry of triumphs, setbacks, and reinventions. From Shakespearean tragedies to Hollywood blockbusters, from London stages to worldwide franchises, Dame Maggie Smith embodied the rarest gift an actor can offer: timelessness. And yet, for all her fame, she never sought the glitz of Beverly Hills or the chaos of red carpets. Instead, she returned each night to the quietude of her English home. Mansion in Surrey. Step through the gates of Byfleet Manor and you feel as though time itself hesitates. The gravel path curves gently through gardens where roses bloom in soft whites and deep reds, and where ancient oaks stand like silent witnesses to centuries gone by. This is no ordinary English countryside home. It is a manor whose story stretches back to the Domesday Book of 1086, once tied to royalty, later chosen by Dame Maggie Smith as her retreat from the world. The manor, rebuilt in 1686, rises in warm red brick, its facade softened by ivy that clings like memory itself. It is not ostentatious, not screaming wealth, but whispering legacy. Inside, space unfolds across 6,000 square feet, each room a blend of history and personal grace. The entrance hall is the first to greet you. High ceilings, oak beams darkened with age, and a staircase that creaks with every step. A sound Maggie must have known well. For visitors, it was a moment of stepping not just into her home, but into the long corridor of English history. The drawing room, expansive yet intimate, is dominated by a great stone fireplace. Here, on many quiet evenings, Maggie entertained her closest friends: Judi Dench, Ian McKellen, Kenneth Branagh. Imagine their laughter echoing off the wood-paneled walls, a gathering of Britain's greatest theatrical voices inside one room. The furniture speaks of understatement: soft armchairs by the fire, a grand piano that hinted at music, not display. Move further, and the library reveals itself. Not vast like in a palace, but personal. Shelves lined with Shakespeare, Chekhov, Wilde, and the countless scripts annotated in Maggie's precise hand. To walk through this room is to glimpse the heartbeat of her career, words, roles, and characters that defined generations. One can almost see her seated at the desk by the window, glasses perched low, revisiting lines she would deliver with razor wit on stage or screen. The dining hall carries echoes of earlier centuries. Long wooden tables polished by time, candle sconces still affixed to the walls. Here, Maggie preferred modest dinners, gatherings where conversation was the true feast. The contrast was striking. A woman of immense fame choosing the intimacy of small suppers over glittering banquets. Upstairs, the bedrooms stretch wide, their windows opening to endless views of Surrey's green fields. Her own chamber looked out upon the rose garden, and many mornings she was said to wander there, script in hand, reciting lines softly to herself. It was a daily ritual, nature as her rehearsal partner. Byfleet Manor is more than walls and rooms. It is surrounded by 18 acres of land, meadows, orchards, and gardens where deer sometimes crossed at dawn. No paparazzi, no relentless noise of London, only the peace of the English countryside. For Maggie, who valued privacy above all else, this was sanctuary. The manor has had a second life, too, on screen. Its halls have appeared in Poirot and Cranford, serving as the backdrop for period dramas. It was almost poetic, a house of history doubling as a stage, much like Maggie herself, carrying history yet always performing anew. Valued at nearly $10 million, Byfleet Manor stands not as a symbol of extravagance, but as a mirror of Maggie Smith's essence, elegant, timeless, and quietly powerful. She did not need marble palaces or glass towers. She needed a place that honored the past while allowing her to live fully in the present. And within those walls, she lived out her final years, a dame, an icon, and yet a woman who cherished silence after decades of applause. But even in this sanctuary, one question lingers. How did her extraordinary career translate into such a lasting fortune and a life of comfort? For a woman who spent her life in the spotlight, Dame Maggie Smith never lived as though wealth defined her. And yet, by the time the final curtain fell, her fortune stood at nearly $20 million, the result of decades of stage triumphs, Hollywood films, and television masterpieces. Where did it all begin? With the stage. In the 1950s and 60s, salaries were modest, but recognition opened doors. Each performance at the National Theater, each critical acclaim, became an investment in the future. Success in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie not only gave her an Oscar, but also elevated her pay, ensuring directors sought her name with serious budgets attached. Hollywood widened the horizon. By the late 1970s, her work in California Suite and other international projects brought Maggie contracts worth more than most stage actors could ever dream of. She became a reliable presence, a performer whose very name promised both artistry and box office appeal. The 1990s brought a new chapter. Family films like Hook, Sister Act, and The Secret Garden introduced her to global audiences and secured paychecks that rivaled her Hollywood contemporaries. At a time when many actors her age were retreating, Maggie was surging forward. Then came the franchise that reshaped everything, Harry Potter. From 2001 to 2011, as Professor Minerva McGonagall, she was not just a character. She was an institution. The films grossed billions, and though she never chased celebrity, her salary reflected her stature. Industry insiders estimate she earned several million across the 8 films, enough to secure her financial legacy. And when others might have retired, Maggie embraced yet another phenomenon, Downton Abbey. As Violet Crawley, the Dowager Countess, she became the beating heart of the series. Her sharp one-liners were quoted worldwide, and with them came Emmy Awards, and handsome contracts from ITV and later the feature films. But unlike stars who poured wealth into yachts or endless estates, Maggie Smith chose simplicity. Her greatest investment was in Byfleet Manor, a $10 million home that gave her privacy. The rest of her fortune remained in carefully managed assets, ensuring stability rather than spectacle. So yes, Dame Maggie Smith left behind a net worth of $20 million. But perhaps the more telling story is how she earned it. Not through scandal, not through excess, but through sheer dedication to craft. And that dedication did not stop with herself. It flowed into causes close to her heart. Philanthropy. For Dame Maggie Smith, generosity was never about headlines. It was about giving back to the world that had given her so much. Her philanthropy began close to home. She became a patron of the Oxford Playhouse, the very stage where a 17-year-old girl once found her calling. Supporting that theater was her way of ensuring other young actors might have the same chance she did. In 2011, tragedy struck far from England. An earthquake devastated Christchurch, New Zealand, leaving the beloved Court Theatre in ruins. Maggie, though half a world away, pledged her support. She helped raise nearly $5 million needed to rebuild the theater, proving that distance did not diminish compassion. Her advocacy extended to health. In 2012, she became patron of Glaucoma UK, lending her name to raise awareness for a disease that silently robs vision. For a woman whose craft depended on presence, expression, and seeing the world clearly, it was a deeply personal cause. She also supported the Royal Theatrical Fund, an organization that assists performers who can no longer work due to illness or injury. To Maggie, theater was family, and family deserved protection. Her generosity sometimes came in the most charming forms. She donated a handprint to a celebrity auction, a decorated garden gnome for a school gardening campaign, small gestures that collectively made a big difference. Even late in life, her spirit of giving did not fade. In 2020, during the global pandemic, she joined Kenneth Branagh, Judi Dench, and Ian McKellen for a virtual event for one night only, raising money for Acting for Others. Watching those legends together was like witnessing living history, and Maggie, as always, gave not just her time but her warmth. Philanthropy for her was not about grandeur. It was about loyalty, to the stage, to her peers, to causes that mattered. And in that, she revealed something essential. Her greatness was not measured only by awards or roles, but by the quiet ways she used her influence to help others. And of course, speaking of greatness, no story of Dame Maggie Smith would be complete without revisiting the honors and awards that crowned her career. When you look at Dame Maggie Smith's life, the awards do not merely decorate her resume. They trace the journey of an actress who redefined longevity, elegance, and craft. Her first great recognition came in 1970, when she was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE. It was a nation acknowledging that this young actress, barely past her 30s, had already become a cultural force. 2 decades later, in 1990, the honor deepened. She was elevated to Dame Commander, DBE, a title that placed her among Britain's most cherished women. From that moment, she was not just Maggie Smith, she was Dame Maggie Smith. And in 2014, the crown jewel arrived, the title of Companion of Honor, CH, awarded for outstanding contributions to the arts. Only 2 actresses before her, Sybil Thorndike and Judi Dench, had ever received it. That distinction alone spoke volumes. But her legacy was not built on titles alone. It was carried by the golden statues of cinema's highest stage. 2 Academy Awards, the first in 1969 for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, the second in 1978 for California Suite. Few actors can claim such triumphs, and fewer still across 2 different decades. Her mantle also held 5 BAFTAs, celebrating her unmatched presence on both film and television. 3 Golden Globes, recognizing her ability to captivate audiences across the Atlantic. 4 Primetime Emmy Awards, many for her unforgettable turn as the Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey. And a Tony Award, proof that even Broadway could not resist her brilliance. Yet perhaps most telling were the 5 Screen Actors Guild Awards. Honors given not by critics or monarchs, but by fellow actors. To be recognized by peers is the ultimate compliment, and Maggie earned it again and again. Other accolades painted the same picture. The BAFTA Fellowship, the highest distinction the Academy could offer. The Evening Standard Icon Award, the Shakespeare Prize, honoring her lifelong devotion to the Bard. Inductions into halls of fame, honorary doctorates from universities like St. Andrews and Cambridge, and even a star on London's Avenue of Stars. Each award was a note in a symphony, and together, they formed the music of a career that spanned 7 decades. But if awards confirmed her genius, they also asked a question. What kind of personal life did she live, beyond the spotlight and the applause? Behind the grandeur of awards and the timeless roles, Dame Maggie Smith's private life was lived with striking simplicity. Personal life. She married playwright Beverly Cross in 1975. It was not a story of red carpet glamour, but of companionship, of 2 artists bound by mutual respect. Their marriage lasted until his passing in 1998, a loss Maggie carried with quiet dignity for the rest of her life. She was not one to seek constant company. In interviews, she admitted to moments of loneliness, confessing that It seems a bit pointless, having to live by oneself and not having anyone to share it with. Yet she filled that solitude with work, with family, and with the quiet rituals of daily life. Family remained her anchor. She was grandmother to 5, and though she rarely spoke of them publicly, those close to her said the moments of laughter shared at home were worth more to her than any ovation. Life also tested her resilience. In 1988, she was diagnosed with Graves' disease, undergoing treatment and eye surgery. Then in 2007 came the news of breast cancer. She endured chemotherapy even while filming the later Harry Potter movies, a fact that astonished colleagues who never once saw her complain. By 2009, she had recovered, though the battle had left its marks. Through it all, her wit never faded. When asked in later years how she viewed herself, she quipped that she was always the supporting act, despite critics hailing her as one of the greatest actresses alive. That humility, that quiet humor, made her beloved not only on stage but in everyday life. She enjoyed privacy most of all. No tabloids chasing scandal, no lavish parties. Her joy came from mornings in the garden at Byfleet Manor, scripts in hand, or evenings by the fire with friends who had known her since the earliest days. Judi Dench, Ian McKellen, a circle of equals who had grown old together. It was a life stripped of excess, but rich in meaning. And then, when time finally demanded its due, Maggie's departure shook not just Britain, but the entire world of cinema and theater. On the morning of September 27, 2024, the curtain fell for the last time. Dame Maggie Smith passed away at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London, aged 89. News spread quickly, and with it came a wave of grief that felt both intimate and universal. For many, she had been a companion across generations, a schoolteacher in the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, a mentor in Harry Potter, a sharp-tongued matriarch in Downton Abbey. Her passing was not just the loss of an actress, but of a presence woven into the very fabric of British culture. Tributes poured in from every corner. King Charles III himself spoke first, calling her a national treasure and praising the warmth and wit that lit both stage and screen. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, followed, noting how she had become a symbol of Britain's creative excellence, admired by millions at home and abroad. From across the Atlantic, her colleagues in Hollywood remembered her in words filled with love. Whoopi Goldberg, who had shared the screen with her in Sister Act, called her a wonderful woman and an extraordinary actress, still marveling at the privilege of working alongside her. Her Harry Potter family was shaken. Daniel Radcliffe said he would always count himself incredibly lucky to have shared scenes with her, insisting that if the word legend applied to anyone, it applied to Maggie. Emma Watson remembered her as practical, honest, funny, and self-respecting, thanking her for her kindness both on and off set. Others echoed the same sentiment. Dame Helen Mirren compared her to Queen Elizabeth II, a constant presence through the decades, quietly shaping lives by simply being there. J.K. Rowling, Julian Fellows, Rupert Grint, Hugh Bonneville, Michelle Dockery, Viola Davis, Saoirse Ronan, Kristen Scott Thomas, and so many more added their voices to the chorus of remembrance. Even outside the world of film, admiration was profound. Musician Paul McCartney, who had dined with her on occasion, spoke of her as both a friend and a timeless artist. Julie Andrews, a lifelong confidant, described her as a dear friend, recalling Maggie's presence at her wedding all those years ago. Theater itself bowed in mourning. On October 1st, 2024, the lights of London's West End were dimmed for 2 minutes in her honor. Soon after, Broadway followed. It was as though the very stages she had graced were pausing, acknowledging the silence left in her absence. Her funeral, on November 4th at Mortlake Crematorium in Richmond, was private, just as she would have wanted. No spectacle, no parade, only family, a handful of close friends, and the quiet dignity she had carried throughout her life. And yet, While the physical chapter ended, her presence did not fade. Every rerun of Downton Abbey, every screening of Harry Potter, every revival of her Shakespearean triumphs brought her back to life, reminding the world of what she gave so freely: truth, wit, and artistry. Dame Maggie Smith's death marked the closing of an era, but her spirit, that unmistakable blend of sharp humor and tender humanity, remains. Because legends do not truly leave us. They linger in the stories, in the performances, and in the memories we carry forward. Dame Maggie Smith may have left this world, but her voice, her wit, and her grace continue to echo through every role she gave us. Which performance of hers touched you the most? Was it the stern wisdom of Professor McGonagall, the sharp humor of the Dowager Countess, or the raw brilliance of Jean Brodie? Share your memories and tributes in the comments below, and let us together honor the timeless legacy of a woman who turned every line, every gesture, into art.